The Montana twilight painted the Ironwood Valley in hues of deep purple and fading gold, a serene vista that belied the turmoil brewing within Wade Thorne. 62 years etched their mark on his weathered face, but it was the restless nights, haunted by echoes of Delta Force missions long past, that truly aged him. He stood on the porch of his secluded farmhouse, the silence broken only by the rustling of wind through the wheat fields and the rhythmic thump of Atlas's tail against the wooden floor. Atlas, a German shepherd with eyes as sharp as shattered glass, rose to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Wade's hand instinctively went to the worn handle of his Colt 1911, a reflex honed over 3 decades of clandestine operations. The tranquility he had sought in this remote valley was now threatened, a sense of unease crawling under his skin. Fresh tire tracks, deep and irregular, marred the dusty lane leading to his property. Not the familiar tread of Sarah Bennett's pickup, nor the reliable Ford of Old Man Henderson. These were heavier, more aggressive, the kind that chewed at the land with disregard. Wade crouched down, his fingers tracing the grooves. The air was still, pregnant with an unspoken menace. "Something's not right, boy," he murmured to Atlas, who responded with a soft whine, pressing closer to his side. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like specters. The arrival of Sarah's weathered Chevy pickup shattered the tension, but not the foreboding. Her face was pale, her hands gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. "Wade, thank God you're here. Have you heard about the Hendersons?" Wade straightened, brushing dirt from his calloused hands. "What about them?" "They're gone. Packed up and left last night, without a word to anyone. And this morning, I saw men at their place. Big, black SUVs, guys who definitely aren't from around here." The pieces clicked into place. Wade's training kicked in, his mind instantly cataloging potential threats and escape routes. He knew, deep down, that his tranquil life was over. "Cartel," he said, his voice calm but firm. Sarah nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "That's what they're saying in town. They've been moving up from the south, buying up properties. Those who don't sell, well, they find other ways to persuade them." A memory flashed through Wade's mind, the charred remains of Miller's barn, a fiery testament to the cartel's methods. He knew this wasn't just about money, it was about control, about transforming the Ironwood Valley into a strategic link in their deadly empire. "Have they approached you yet?" Wade asked, his gaze unwavering. "No, but Miller's place went last week. Same thing, mysterious buyers, too much money to refuse. Those who stick around say they're using the farms for distribution routes." Wade's mind raced, assessing the tactical implications. Isolated properties, legitimate cover for heavy vehicle traffic, storage facilities already in place, it was a perfect setup. But they had chosen the wrong valley to invade. "Don't worry, Sarah," Wade said, his voice laced with a steel edge. "I've dealt with worse. Just be careful. They're targeting this valley systematically. It won't be long before they come knocking on your door." As Sarah drove away, her pickup disappearing in a cloud of dust, Wade whistled for Atlas and headed towards the old barn. Inside, beneath the mundane tools and farm equipment, lay a hidden cellar, a sanctuary of steel and gunpowder, a legacy of a life he had tried to leave behind. His friends had called it paranoia. Wade called it preparation. He lifted the false floorboard, revealing a cache of equipment, military-grade communication gear, silenced weapons, tactical vests, everything he might need if things went south. He'd spent his entire career planning for worst-case scenarios. This wouldn't be any different. His phone buzzed, a text from an old contact in law enforcement, cartel moving hard and fast. 7 properties taken in the last month. Watch your back. Wade pocketed the phone, his gaze hardening. He was no longer a retired farmer, a quiet recluse. He was Phantom again, a ghost resurrected from the shadows, ready to defend the only home he had ever truly known. The coming storm wouldn't be just about land and money. It would be about vengeance, about protecting the innocent, about proving that some old soldiers never truly lose their edge. And he, Wade Thorne, was about to remind the most ruthless cartel in the Western Hemisphere of that fact in the most brutal way possible. The sun set, casting long shadows across the landscape, as Wade prepared to face the darkness once again. The valley was about to learn that the quiet farmer had a past that was about to become its present. The Montana air grew colder, laced with the scent of pine and the promise of an impending frost. Wade spent the next few hours poring over detailed topographical maps of Ironwood Valley, his fingers tracing the familiar contours. His property, strategically positioned at a crucial junction, controlled the main road and overlooked 3 distinct approach routes. No wonder they wanted it. The sound of approaching vehicles shattered his concentration. Peering through the barn's grimy windows, he watched 3 black SUVs, the same ones Sarah had described, roll past his gate, moving at a deliberate, almost mocking pace. Reconnaissance, plain and simple. Marking their next target. Atlas, Wade said, scratching his dog's ears. They don't know who they're dealing with, do they? Atlas responded with a soft growl, his gaze fixed on the departing vehicles. The decision was made. Wade couldn't face this alone. It was time to call in the ghosts, the only men he trusted, the only family he had left. He needed Knox, Raven, Cyrus, and Nash, a team forged in the fires of countless covert operations, a brotherhood bound by blood and shared sacrifice. His first call went to Knox, his voice low and steady, masking the years of weariness. Knox, it's Phantom. Remember that favor you owe me? Time to pay up. A gruff voice crackled on the other end of the line, the familiar cadence of a man who had stared death in the face countless times. Wade. Been a long time. How bad is it? Cartels moving into the valley, taking farms, setting up distribution networks. They'll be here soon. A low whistle resonated from the other end. Need some backup, huh? Might not hurt to have the old team together again, one last mission. It might not hurt, Wade agreed, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. You know we're not as young as we used to be. Neither are they, Knox retorted, his voice gaining a familiar edge of anticipation. Call the others. We've got work to do. The next few hours were a blur of coded messages and hurried preparations. Wade activated his real security system, cameras hidden in the trees, motion sensors ringing the perimeter, all feeding into a command center he'd built in his basement, a relic from his days as a planning officer. The past he tried to bury was now his greatest asset. As he waited for his team to arrive, Wade received another text message, this one from Zane, intercepted comms. Full assault planned. They're not waiting 24 hours. Wade's lips tightened. Perfect. He preferred a direct confrontation to a drawn-out war of attrition. His phone rang. It was Sarah, her voice tight with worry. Wade, they were at your place, weren't they? I saw the SUVs. Just a friendly business proposition, Sarah, Wade replied, checking the magazine of his silenced Beretta. Nothing to worry about. Don't lie to me, Sarah retorted, her voice laced with anger. Miller tried to stand up to them. Next day, his barn burned down. Day after that, his wife's car crashed on a straight road. No witnesses. Wade's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about protecting his land, it was about protecting Sarah, about avenging the innocent, about preventing the cartel from turning his tranquil valley into a war zone. Listen carefully, Sarah, Wade said, his voice calm and reassuring. For the next few days, stay with your sister in Missoula. Don't tell anyone you're going. Wade, what are you planning? Her voice trembled with fear. Better you don't know. Just trust me. He hung up, severing the last tie to his civilian life. He was Phantom again, a ghost unleashed, ready to wage war. The rumble of engines echoed through the valley. Checking his security feeds, Wade watched 4 vehicles approaching from different directions, using old tactics to avoid detection. Knox's black pickup came first, followed by Cyrus in a weather jeep, Zane and Nash arriving minutes later, their vehicles coated in dust from back road driving. Wade met them in the barn, away from prying eyes. 20 years melted away as his old team assembled, their movements still synchronized after all this time. Knox, Wade said, shaking his friend's hand. The sniper carried his custom rifle case like a part of him. Wade, Knox replied, his gaze sweeping across the barn. Nice setup. Good sight lines. Multiple escape routes. You weren't kidding about being ready. Cyrus arrived, a mischievous grin on his face, hefting a duffel bag. Got enough explosives here to level a small town. Zane connected his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Cartel's been systematic, taking key properties, establishing distribution routes. They're not just running drugs, they're setting up a permanent operation. Nash, ever pragmatic, began organizing his medical supplies. How many are we dealing with? Main force is 30 men, Wade replied, pointing to marked locations on a map. 2 separate groups. First team's the muscle, they handle intimidation. Second team's they're professionals, actual combat experience. Ex-military, for sure, Knox observed, examining the terrain through the barn door. Kill zones are perfect. Natural bottleneck here. High ground advantage. We can funnel them right where we want them. They'll come in force, Wade warned. No more pretense of being businessmen. They've got heavy weapons, armor, probably air support. Cyrus grinned, pulling out his demolition plans. Been a while since we had a proper fight. Wade looked at his team, his gaze hardening. This isn't just about holding them off. We end this permanently. Not just here. We shut down their entire operation in the valley. The team sobered, recognizing the tone. It was the voice that had led them through impossible missions, that had brought them all home alive when the odds said otherwise. The game had changed. This wasn't just a defense, it was a war. And they, the ghosts of Delta Force, were ready to wage it. The following hours were a frenzied dance of preparation. The once ordinary farm transformed into a meticulously crafted battlefield. Cyrus, a whirlwind of controlled chaos, rigged the main road with remote detonated explosives powerful enough to cripple an armored vehicle. Knox, ever the precision marksman, established 3 distinct sniper nests, each covering a different approach route with overlapping fields of fire. Zane, his fingers dancing across his laptop, established a secure command center in Wade's basement, linking their communication and surveillance systems into a seamless network. He tapped into local law enforcement frequencies, monitoring their responses, gathering intel. "Remember Kandahar?" Knox asked, as they meticulously camouflaged their positions. "That night raid that went sideways when the whole city lit up?" Cyrus chuckled, wiring the barn for remote detonation, making it look like a tempting target. "Never saw so much firepower in my life," until Wade called an audible. "Turn their own defenses against them," Nash added, organizing his medical supplies, upgrading his kit. He would patch them up again. "Still don't know how you knew that would work," Knox said, shaking his head. Wade simply shrugged, checking ammunition stores. "People get predictable when they think they have the advantage. Cartels the same way. They're used to civilians, used to easy victories. They won't be ready for what's coming." Zane's voice crackled over their earpieces. "Movement at the Henderson place. They're assembling their force. Thermal imaging shows at least 20 vehicles. They're not subtle anymore. Coming in like an army," Cyrus observed, finishing his last explosive trap. "Good," Wade replied, a grim smile playing on his lips. "Means they're scared. Scared men make mistakes." As dusk settled, casting long, eerie shadows across the valley, Wade gathered his team on the porch, watching the day fade. They were no longer young men, but they possessed something else: experience, patience, a wisdom born from decades of combat. "Knox, I want you in the North Tower. Best sightlines, and they won't expect anyone up there. Cyrus, rig the barn for remote detonation. Make it look like a tempting target. Zane, keep monitoring their comms. The moment they split their forces, we take advantage. Nash, medical station in the basement. But be ready to move. This gets hot, we'll need you mobile." Each man nodded, understanding their roles without the need for further explanation. This wasn't their first impossible mission, it was just maybe their last. Wade paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his friends. "One more thing. We're not just defending a farm. We're defending every family in this valley, every person these bastards would victimize. We do this right, we do it clean, and we do it permanent." As his team moved to their positions, Wade checked his weapons one final time. Atlas sat beside him, alert and ready. He could hear the distant rumble of engines, the cartel's forces assembling. They thought they were preparing to raid an old man's farm. Instead, they were walking into a kill zone, designed by one of the most experienced special operations commanders in history. The radio crackled. Zane's voice, tight with suppressed adrenaline, broke the tense silence. "First wave moving out. ETA 20 minutes. "Copy that," Wade replied, signaling to his team. "Remember, let them get comfortable. Let them think they have the advantage. Then we show them what real soldiers can do." The Montana sun disappeared behind the mountains, plunging the valley into darkness. But darkness had always been their ally. In the shadows, Wade Thorne wasn't a farmer anymore, he was Phantom again, the ghost that hunted other ghosts. And he was about to remind the cartel why that name had once struck fear into the hearts of far more dangerous men than them. He just had to play his part. The unassuming old farmer, with just enough toughness to make him a nuisance, not a threat. Moonlight silvered the Montana landscape as Wade watched the cartel convoy approach through his night vision scope. 20 vehicles, moving in a tight formation. Someone had trained them well. Too bad they'd forgotten the first rule of combat: never fight on ground your enemy has prepared. "They're splitting up," Zane's voice crackled through the comms. 3 teams. Main force coming up the central road. Two flanking units trying to circle wide. Knox's voice, cold and professional, cut through the tension from his sniper's nest. Got eyes on the lead vehicle. Officer types in the back seat. Want me to take the shot? Negative, Wade replied, his gaze fixed on the approaching convoy. Let them get comfortable. Spring the trap on my mark. The convoy's headlights sliced through the darkness, illuminating the road to Wade's farm. They moved with a swaggering confidence, no attempt at stealth. Why bother? They thought they were hunting an old man. Contact in 2 minutes, Cyrus reported, his voice laced with barely restrained glee. Charges are set. These boys are in for a surprise. Wade watched through his scope as the first vehicles reached his outer perimeter. The cartel soldiers emerged with military precision, weapons at the ready, moving in practiced formations. Felix Reyes stepped out of an armored SUV, directing his men with sharp hand signals. Spread out, Felix ordered in Spanish, his voice amplified by a bullhorn. I want this place surrounded. No one gets out alive. They're deploying heavy weapons, Zane warned. 50 calories on the trucks, RPGs in the second wave. Wade's voice remained calm, a stark contrast to the rising tension in the comms. Stick to the plan. Let them commit. The cartel forces advanced steadily, moving past the first line of Wade's defenses without noticing them. 50 meters. 40, 30. They were almost in position. Sir, one of Felix's men called out, his voice laced with confusion. No movement in the house. Thermals showing nothing. Felix grabbed his radio, his frustration evident. Check the barn. He has to be here somewhere. 3 cartel soldiers approached the barn, weapons at the ready. Wade watched them through his scope, counting down in his head. This was the moment. Now, Wade commanded. Cyrus detonated his first series of charges. The ground erupted beneath the lead vehicles, sending them airborne in a shower of dirt, metal, and screams. The air filled with the acrid smell of explosives and burning gasoline. Before the dust settled, Knox opened fire from his hidden position. 2 cartel soldiers dropped before they even realized they were under attack. Que demonios es eso? Felix shouted, diving for cover. Where's the fire coming from? The night exploded into chaos. Wade's team had prepared kill zones throughout the property, and now they put them to devastating use. Every time the cartel forces tried to rally, they found themselves caught in interlocking fields of fire. 3 trying to flank east, Knox reported calmly, his rifle cracking in the darkness. Got 'em. Cyrus responded with a series of explosions that drove the flanking team right into Nash's line of fire. Wade moved like a ghost through the darkness, years of combat experience guiding every step. He caught 2 cartel soldiers by surprise, disarming one and using him as a shield against the other's fire. Both went down without a sound. Who are these guys? A cartel soldier screamed over their radio. This isn't right. They're too organized. Felix's voice cut through the chaos, his authority starting to crumble. They're professionals. Fall back to the vehicles. Reform defensive positions. Too late, Wade whispered, triggering another set of charges. The explosions cut off their retreat, trapping the cartel forces in the kill zone. Knox's rifle spoke again. Technical at your 3 o'clock, Wade. Gunner down, but drivers still up. Wade rolled behind a tractor as 50 caliber rounds tore through the air where he'd been standing. The technical's driver was skilled, keeping the vehicle moving to avoid return fire. But he'd forgotten to watch his flanks. Cyrus, Wade called. Time to use that toy you brought. A rocket streaked through the darkness, slamming into the Technical's engine block. The vehicle flipped, cartwheeling off the road in a ball of flame. Damn, I missed that, Cyrus laughed. Just like Damascus. Stay focused, Wade ordered, his voice firm. They're regrouping. Felix had managed to rally his remaining men behind the wreckage of their vehicles. They had training, Wade gave them that. Even caught by surprise, they were adapting quickly. Zane, what's their strength? Wade asked, moving to a new position. 18 still combat effective. They're calling for reinforcements. Second wave is 30 minutes out. They won't last that long, Knox stated flatly, his rifle ending another cartel soldier's attempt to flank their position. Wade watched Felix directing his men, noting their movements. They were trying to establish a base of fire, create space for their reinforcements to arrive. Standard military doctrine. Time to show them why standard responses got you killed. Cyrus, hit their rally point. Knox, watch for runners. Nash, be ready. Some of them are about to need medical attention. Multiple explosions ripped through the cartel's position. Wade moved through the chaos like a wraith, his suppressed rifle ending threats before they could materialize. 2 decades of fighting had taught him the value of economy of motion, no wasted movements, no hesitation. Contact front, a cartel soldier screamed. He's inside our perimeter. Wade's reply was swift and silent. 3 more went down before they could turn to face him. Felix, his voice hoarse with desperation, screamed into the darkness. Who are you? What kind of farmer fights like this? The kind you shouldn't have threatened, Wade replied, his voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. The cartel's first assault was falling apart. What had started as a confident attack had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. 8 vehicles were burning, and of the 40 men Felix had brought, less than half were still fighting. Pull back. Felix ordered, his voice laced with panic. Full retreat. Get back to the rally point. I don't think so, Wade said calmly. Knox's sniper rifle cracked 3 times. The remaining vehicle's tires exploded, stranding them in the kill zone. El Fantasma is going to kill us all, Felix muttered, realizing the trap they were in. El Fantasma should have done his homework, Wade replied, stepping out of the shadows behind Felix. Should have asked why no one had ever successfully attacked this farm. Felix spun, raising his weapon, but he was too slow. Wade's strike was precise, efficient. The cartel leader dropped unconscious. As his remaining men surrendered, Wade knew that only the first dance of death had been completed. The aftermath of the first battle left Wade's farm eerily quiet, the flickering flames of burning vehicles casting grotesque shadows across the Montana night. Zip-tied cartel soldiers sat huddled under Nash's watchful eye, their faces a mixture of fear and resignation. Felix Reyes, slowly regaining consciousness, looked around with dawning realization at the magnitude of their miscalculation. 16 prisoners, Nash reported, finishing another field dressing. 3 critical but stable. The rest are walking wounded. Wade knelt beside Felix, who glared up at him with a mixture of fear and defiance. Now then, Wade said quietly, his voice devoid of any emotion, let's talk about El Fantasma. Go to hell, Felix spat, switching to a string of furious Spanish curses. Your choice, Wade replied, his perfect Spanish shocking Felix into stunned silence. But your reinforcements are coming into my kill zone in less than 15 minutes. Would be a shame if they made the same mistakes you did. Zane approached, laptop in hand, his face illuminated by the screen. Intercepted their comms. El Fantasma is coming personally. He's pissed. Bringing in heavy weapons, professional contractors. This isn't going to be like the first wave. Felix laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You're all dead. El Fantasma doesn't leave witnesses. He'll burn this whole valley to get to you. How many? Wade asked calmly, his gaze unwavering. Enough to kill you 10 times over, Felix sneered. Former Mexican Special Forces, Colombian mercenaries, the cartel's best killers. They'll. Wade cut him off, his voice laced with a chilling itch. I meant, how many families have you terrorized? How many farms have you taken? How many accidents have you arranged? The question caught Felix off guard, his arrogance cracking for just a moment, revealing a sliver of uncertainty beneath. Knox's voice crackled over the comms. Wade, what do you see? The sniper's voice was cold and professional, a stark contrast to the growing chaos in the air. Multiple vehicles, different approach vectors. They're being smart this time. Thermal shows at least 40 troops, maybe more. Multiple heavy weapons teams. They're spreading out, won't fall for the same trap twice. Cyrus added, his voice grim. They're not making the same mistakes as the first wave. Real professionals. This is going to be a war. Wade turned back to Felix, his eyes like chips of ice. Last chance. Help us end this with minimal bloodshed, or watch more of your men die needlessly. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Felix said, his voice dropping, laced with a genuine fear. El Fantasma. He's different. He enjoys the violence, the killing. You should run while you can. Already met men like him, Wade replied, standing, his voice carrying the weight of countless battles. In places much worse than this. They're all the same in the end. Zane's voice cut through the night. First elements reaching the outer perimeter. They're moving slower, checking for traps. Wade moved to his team, their faces illuminated by the burning wreckage, the flickering light casting dancing shadows that amplified their grim determination. They'll come from multiple directions this time, looking to overwhelm us with numbers and firepower, Wade said, his voice clear and authoritative. Knox, I want you mobile. Change positions after every few shots. Cyrus, time for the secondary charges. Zane, keep their comms scrambled. Nash, get the wounded prepped for evac. The team moved with practiced efficiency, each knowing their role, trusting the others to play theirs. This wasn't their first impossible mission, just maybe their last. Remember, Wade added, his voice carrying the weight of command, they're expecting us to be tired, maybe wounded. They think the first fight cost us. Let them think that. Let them get overconfident. A new voice cut through their radio frequencies, deep, commanding, speaking Spanish with a Calo accent. El Fantasma himself. Directing his forces. Find their command channel, Zane reported. Want me to jam it? Zane asked. No, Wade said, a grim smile playing on his lips. Let them talk. Fear works better when they can share it. The team split up, moving to predetermined positions. Years of working together meant they barely needed words. Each man knew his job, trusted the others to do theirs. Through his night vision, Wade watched the cartel's second wave advancing, their movement more professional now, leapfrogging between cover, maintaining proper intervals. El Fantasma had indeed brought his best. Contact in 2 minutes, Knox reported. Got eyes on their command element. El Fantasma in the black Suburban, 3 vehicles back, heavily guarded. Cyrus, Wade directed, his voice calm. Give them something to think about. A series of explosions ripped through the night, not aimed at the cartel forces directly, but illuminating the battlefield in a sudden, blinding light. In the brief flash, they could see what they were walking into: defensive positions covering every approach, kill zones arranged with cold, calculating precision. Madre de Dios, one of the cartel soldiers whispered over their open channel. The whole property's fortified. Keep advancing. El Fantasma's voice boomed across the radio. They're just trying to scare us. Press the attack. Wade's voice cut into their frequency, speaking calm, measured Spanish. 43 minutes ago, I had twice your number in body bags or zip ties. That was when I was being gentle. Last warning, withdraw, or meet the same fate. The cartel forces hesitated, their advance faltering. El Fantasma's response was immediate and brutal. He shot one of his own men who had stopped moving. The next one who shows cowardice dies by my hand, he roared. Forward. Kill them all. Wade sighed, switching back to his team's channel. Can't say we didn't try. Cyrus, you got something special for them. The demo expert replied with a chilling laugh. Remember that trick we used in Fallujah? Time to dust it off. The night erupted in a carefully orchestrated chaos. Explosions chained across the battlefield, but these weren't meant to kill, they were precise, tactical, cutting off escape routes, separating units from each other, creating confusion and panic. The valley was about to get much hotter for the cartel. The carefully choreographed chaos had worked. El Fantasma's forces, now fragmented and disoriented, struggled to maintain any semblance of order. They're spread too thin, Knox reported, his rifle cracking methodically, taking targets of opportunity. Wade moved through the darkness, a silent predator. 2 cartel soldiers, separated from their unit, were attempting to set up a machine gun nest. Good position, good fields of fire. They never saw him coming. The first went down to a throat strike, a silent, brutal takedown. The second to a precision shot to the head. Contact front, a cartel soldier screamed, firing blindly into the shadows. Wade was already gone, a phantom disappearing into the night. 3 more went down before they realized where he had been, and by then, he'd moved again. They're not human, another soldier cried out in Spanish. They're everywhere. Keep fighting. Push forward. El Fantasma's voice commanded, but his authority was crumbling. His men were experienced soldiers, but they'd never faced anything like this, an enemy that seemed to materialize from nowhere, strike without warning, and vanish before they could respond. West sector's getting heavy, Nash reported, his voice strained. They're making a serious push. That's their feint, Wade replied, his mind already anticipating their next move. Knox, watch the east. That's where their real attack is coming. Sure enough, while one team pushed aggressively from the west, their best operators were moving silently through the eastern approach. It was a solid tactic, one that would have worked against most opponents. Contact 12, Knox said quietly. Elite team. Moving like professionals. These are their best. Good, Wade replied, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Cyrus, Nash, shift east. Knox, hold your fire until my mark. Let's show them what real professionals can do. The elite cartel team moved with impressive skill, using every bit of cover, maintaining perfect spacing. They were halfway to their objective when Wade sprung his trap. Cyrus's charges illuminated the night, not with damaging explosions, but with blinding magnesium flares. Before the cartel operators could adjust their night vision, Knox opened fire from his elevated position. Every shot found its mark, not killing, but disabling, taking out knees and shoulders with surgical precision. "Clean them up," Wade ordered, and Nash moved in with swift efficiency, securing the wounded operators. El Fantasma's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "Who are you people? You really should have done your research," Wade replied calmly, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Asked around about who owned this farm, about why no one had ever successfully attacked it." A new sound cut through the night, the unmistakable whump-whump of helicopter rotors. "Boss, they're bringing in air support," Zane warned, his voice tense. "Right on schedule," Wade smiled. "Cyrus." "Oh yeah, got something special for choppers." "Just say when." The helicopter swept in low, its spotlight cutting through the darkness. The door gunner opened up with a minigun, stitching a line of destruction across Wade's property. But the team had prepared for this too. "Now," Wade commanded. Cyrus triggered a specialized charge, not an explosion, but a massive flashbang, designed specifically for aircraft. The helicopter pilot, momentarily blinded, yanked the stick back. The sudden move threw off the gunner's aim. Knox's sniper rifle cracked once. The spotlight exploded, plunging the helicopter back into darkness. Two more precise shots disabled the minigun. "You can land safely," Wade broadcast to the pilot, his voice calm and authoritative, "or you can crash. Your choice." The helicopter, its pilot choosing wisdom over valor, retreated. On the ground, El Fantasma was shouting orders with increasing desperation. His elite team was down, his air support driven off, and his men were losing cohesion. "How many more men are you willing to sacrifice?" Wade asked over their channel, his voice a chilling whisper in the night. "How many bodies before you realize you've made a mistake?" The response was immediate, a massive barrage of automatic weapons fire. But Wade had already moved, ghosting through the darkness to a new position, anticipating the response. 2 decades ago, they'd called him Phantom because he could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and vanish before the enemy could respond. Tonight, he was reminding them why. El Fantasma's voice cut through the chaos with cold fury. "Burn everything. Burn it all to the ground." His men deployed incendiary weapons, trying to deny Wade's team their carefully prepared positions. The night lit up with phosphorus and thermite, turning the battlefield into a hellscape of fire and smoke. The battle had escalated again. The world was ablaze. Rolling waves of heat washed over Wade as he navigated the burning landscape, the acrid smoke stinging his eyes and choking his lungs. The cartel's incendiary assault had been brutal, forcing the team to abandon key defensive positions and scramble for cover. "They're getting desperate," Knox observed, relocating as flames consumed his previous sniper's nest. "Making mistakes," Wade warned. "Careful. Desperate men are unpredictable." "Zane, what are you seeing?" Wade asked, his voice strained against the roar of the fire. "They're splitting into 3 groups. Main force still pushing center, but they're deploying their best units wide, trying to flank through the burning zones." A massive explosion rocked the farmhouse as the cartel deployed satchel charges against the outer walls. The reinforced structure held, a testament to Cyrus's meticulous preparation, but the message was clear: they were done probing and ready to destroy everything. "Sir," Nash called out, his voice tight. "We've got wounded to evacuate. These fires are getting too close to the holding area." Wade's mind raced, processing the rapidly deteriorating tactical situation. The cartel was pushing hard, their best units probing for weaknesses, the wounded needed to be moved, and the fire was closing in. "Knox, cover the east approach," Wade barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Cyrus, buy us some time. Everyone else, fall back to position 3. We're not losing anyone tonight." "Got something special saved for this," Cyrus replied, a hint of dark humor in his voice. "Might want to cover your eyes." Multiple explosions chained across the property, but these were different. They weren't designed to destroy, but to illuminate. Magnesium flares, burning with an intensity that defied the fires, created temporary walls of light, blinding anyone looking in their direction. Under the cover of this sudden, blinding illumination, Wade's team executed a fighting withdrawal, moving their prisoners and wounded to a fortified storm cellar they'd prepared for exactly this scenario. The heat was intense, the smoke thick, but their movements were precise, their teamwork seamless. "They're pushing hard on the west side," Knox reported, his rifle cracking steadily. "These guys are different. Cartel's elite death squad. I recognize their tactics from the briefings. Los Fantasmas." "Confirmed," Wade replied, his gaze sweeping across the battlefield. "El Fantasma's personal kill team. Ex-Mexican special forces who went rogue. They're good." "Not good enough," Knox replied, punctuating his words with another precise shot. The Los Fantasmas moved with fluid grace, using the fires as cover, their thermal imaging equipment allowing them to see through the smoke. They were well equipped, with advanced body armor and military-grade weapons. These weren't cartel thugs, these were professional killers. "Contact!" Zane shouted, his voice laced with alarm. 3 death squad members have breached the inner perimeter. Moving with lethal precision toward the command center. Wade moved to intercept, but they had him pinned down with well-coordinated fire, rounds impacting all around him. "Little help here," Wade called out, his voice surprisingly calm despite the bullets cutting through the air around him. "Working on it," Cyrus replied, his voice strained. The ground erupted beneath the death squad, not with explosives, but with compressed air and dirt. A non-lethal but disorienting blast that broke their formation. Wade capitalized instantly, closing the distance. The fight was brief but brutal, a whirlwind of fists, knives, and suppressed gunfire. The death squad members were excellent shots, but Wade had spent decades mastering close-quarter combat. The first went down to a throat strike, a knife-disarm combination he'd perfected over years of training. The second managed to land a solid hit, a glancing blow to Wade's ribs, before Wade's elbow strike found the sweet spot behind his ear. The third proved tougher, clearly their hand-to-hand specialist. "Impressive," the man said in accented English, squaring up, a fighter's stance. "But you're still just an old man." Wade's response was a lightning-fast combination that ended with the specialist unconscious on the ground. "Age and treachery, kid," Wade retorted, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Beats youth and enthusiasm every time." "We've got a problem," Zane cut in, his voice urgent. "They're bringing up something big. Thermals showing, oh hell, they've got a technical with a heavy autocannon." The sound of the 20mm autocannon split the night, its rounds powerful enough to punch through Wade's reinforced walls. This wasn't about taking the farm anymore, this was about complete destruction. "Knox, can you get a shot?" Wade asked, his voice tight. "Negative. They've got it too well protected. Need a new angle." Wade thought fast, his mind racing through tactical options. The cannon was devastating, but it had weaknesses. Cyrus, remember Serbia? That arms depot, the one with the tanks. There was a moment of silence, then Cyrus's voice exploded with understanding. "Yeah, that was, oh, I like where this is going. Can you do it, just like old times, boss?" "Give me 2 minutes," Cyrus replied. El Phantasma's voice boomed across their comms. "You see this? This is what happens to those who resist. We will reduce this place to ash." The autocannon continued its devastating barrage, its rounds tearing through the night. But Wade had fought against worse. "Zane, patch me into their frequency," Wade ordered, his voice calm. "Time to explain something to our friend." The line cleared, and Wade's voice, cold and professional, cut through the enemy chatter. "That's an impressive gun. Russian-made, probably stolen from a military depot. Very effective against buildings, not so great against what's coming. Asterisk, you're finished, El Fantasma. You're finished." El Fantasma shouted, his voice laced with barely suppressed panic. "Your defenses are breaking." "Look to your left," Wade replied calmly. The cartel boss did, just in time to see Cyrus's surprise. The old barn, which they thought was just burning, suddenly revealed its secret. The entire structure had been rigged as a massive directional blast, focusing its force right at the technical. The ensuing explosion wasn't meant to destroy, that would have been too dangerous. Instead, it created a massive pressure wave that overturned the vehicle, rendering the cannon useless and sending El Phantasma's men scrambling for cover. The dance was reaching its crescendo. "That was our excuse to keep things civil," Wade announced, his voice cutting through the static on their comms. "Push any harder, and we stop being nice." The fight was getting personal. "Kill them all!" El Phantasmas screamed. But there was an edge of fear in his voice now. His men were dying or surrendering, his best units were down, and his heavy weapons were being systematically eliminated. "Boss," Nash called out, his voice tight. "Got movement in the tree line. Looks like they're bringing up their reserve force." "Good," Wade replied, his voice grim. "About time they committed everything. Knox, you know what to do." The sniper's rifle began its deadly work, not killing, but methodically disabling, targeting vehicle tires, weapon systems, anything that hampered the cartel's ability to fight. Each shot was calculated, designed to reduce their options, to force them into predictable responses. "They're pulling back," Zane reported, his fingers flying across his laptop keyboard. "Regrouping around their command vehicle." Wade checked his ammunition, his senses on high alert. The fires still burned across his property, casting an eerie glow on the scene of devastation. The farm was damaged but not destroyed, his team was tired but not beaten, and El Phantasma had just made his biggest mistake, consolidating his forces into one location. "All units," Wade commanded, his voice radiating authority. "Prepare for final phase. Remember, we're not just defending anymore. Time to show them why you don't bring a cartel to a Delta Force fight." The night was about to get much worse for El Phantasma and his men. They thought they were winning, by forcing Wade's team to fall back, into the seemingly impenetrable farmhouse. Instead, they were walking right into the trap he'd been setting up since the beginning. Wade watched El Fantasma's forces consolidate around their command vehicle, exactly where he wanted them. The cartel boss thought he was being smart, concentrating his remaining strength. Instead, he just put all his assets in one, meticulously prepared kill zone. "All units," Wade commanded, his voice radiating authority. "Execute Phoenix Protocol." Acknowledgements came in quick succession. This was it. They'd drilled this scenario countless times in their active duty days, a carefully orchestrated plan designed to turn the enemy's strength against them. "Stand by for some fireworks," Cyrus announced, his voice laced with a familiar glee. "Those charges we didn't use earlier? They're about to earn their keep." Knox's voice was cold and professional. "Target area mapped. I've got clean shots on their command and control elements." "Remember," Wade reminded them, his voice hard, "we want survivors. They need to carry our message back." The counterattack began with surgical precision. Cyrus's charges detonated in sequence, not to kill, but to isolate, walls of fire and smoke cutting off escape routes, channeling the cartel forces exactly where Wade wanted them. "What are they doing?" El Fantasma demanded, his voice laced with panic, watching his carefully positioned men suddenly trapped in overlapping fields of fire. "Teaching you about real combat," Wade replied over their channel, his voice a chilling whisper in the night. "Pay attention. This is how professionals work." Knox's rifle spoke first, taking out their communications array with 3 precise shots. Then went their vehicle engines, each disabled with methodical efficiency. The cartel forces were now deaf, blind, and immobile, penned in by flames and gunfire. "You think this changes anything?" El Fantasma shouted, but his voice carried an edge of panic. "I have more men. More resources." "Not anymore," Wade replied, as Zane's electronic warfare suite kicked in, flooding their frequencies with static. "Right now, your reinforcements are being intercepted by state police. Amazing what happens when someone provides actionable intelligence about cartel movements." The cartel boss's response was predictable, ordering his men to attack in all directions, a desperate attempt to break free from the trap. But Wade's team had trained for exactly this scenario. They moved like ghosts through the smoke and chaos, appearing and disappearing at will, exploiting every weakness, turning every advantage against them. "Contact front," a cartel soldier screamed, firing at shadows. Wade was already gone, his precise and devastating fire taking out 3 more before they realized where he was. And by then, he'd moved again. "They're not human," another soldier cried out. "They're everywhere. Keep fighting." El Fantasma's voice carried over the chaos, laced with a desperate edge. "Burn everything. Burn it all to the ground." But even as the fires raged, they were no match for the coordinated precision of Wade's team. "Boss," Nash called out, his voice calm in the face of chaos. "Got movement in the tree line. Looks like they're bringing up their reserve force." "Good," Wade replied, his gaze sweeping the battlefield. "About time they committed everything. Knox, you know what to do." The sniper's rifle began its deadly work, not killing, but methodically disabling vehicles, weapons, and equipment, each shot calculated to reduce the cartel's options. "They're pulling back," Zane reported, his voice tight. "Regrouping around their command vehicle." Wade checked his ammunition, noting the fires still burning across his property. The farm was damaged, but not destroyed. His team was tired, but not beaten. And El Fantasma had just made his biggest mistake, consolidating his forces into one location. All that was left was to set it all to motion. As if reading his thoughts, the pieces started falling into place. From the look of things, the end was near. The air crackled with anticipation. The scattered remnants of the cartel's forces, trapped and isolated, were like rats in a cage, their movements desperate and futile. The moment of truth had arrived. Eastern Group is surrendering, Zane reported, his voice barely audible above the crackle of the flames and the sporadic gunfire. Western Group is. Wait, Wade cut him off, his voice sharp, his senses on high alert. Movement by the command vehicle. El Fantasma is making a break for it. A flicker of movement in the darkness confirmed it. The cartel boss, abandoning his remaining men, was attempting to slip away, using the chaos as cover. It was a predictable move, but a dangerous one. Let him run, Wade ordered, his voice laced with anticipation. Right to where we want him. El Fantasma, his face contorted with rage and fear, grabbed two of his best remaining men, using them as a shield as he fled into the night. He moved well, clearly a seasoned operative who hadn't always been just a commander. But Wade had planned for this. El Fantasma's escape route led him straight into a prepared position, a small clearing bathed in the eerie glow of the burning wreckage. One moment he was running, driven by desperation, the next he was face to face with Wade himself. Impressive operation you had here, Wade said conversationally, his rifle trained center mass, his voice devoid of emotion. Good men, good equipment, solid tactics. But you made one critical mistake. El Fantasma snarled, his hand inching towards a concealed weapon. And what's that? You thought fear only worked one way, Wade replied, his voice carrying the weight of decades of combat experience. You're used to being the one people fear. Tonight, you learn what real fear feels like. The cartel boss moved fast, drawing his pistol in a practiced motion, but Wade was faster. One precise shot knocked the weapon away, sending it spinning into the dirt. Another dropped El Fantasma's remaining guards, silencing their screams with a muffled thud. Do you know what the difference is between your men and mine? Wade asked, advancing slowly as El Fantasma scrambled backward, his eyes wide with terror. Training. Experience. All that matters little without purpose. You're insane, El Fantasma hissed, his voice trembling. You're just a crazy old man. Insane? No. Dedicated. It's those with nothing to lose that are the most dangerous. And I've seen too many lives lost in this valley to let you take any more. Around them, the battle was ending. Most of the cartel forces had surrendered, realizing the futility of their position. Those still fighting were being systematically isolated and neutralized. You're trapped, El Fantasma gasped. I'm going to kill you. Just as the cartel boss reached for a backup weapon hidden in his boot, Wade's response was instantaneous and precise. A controlled burst of rounds slammed into El Fantasma's shoulder and leg, dropping him to the ground, writhing in agony. Gather the survivors, Wade commanded, his voice clear and authoritative. I want them to hear this clearly. As his team rounded up the remaining cartel forces, herding them into a tight group, Wade stood before them, his presence commanding absolute attention. These weren't just defeated soldiers, they were witnesses to something they'd never seen before. You're alive because we chose precision over power, Wade announced, his voice carrying across the battlefield, the weight of his words amplified by the silence that had fallen over the scene. You'll remain alive as long as you remember this lesson. This valley is protected. Not by cops, not by guns, but by something far more dangerous, men who've spent their lives learning how to fight smarter, not harder. Knox's voice came over the comms. Police forces approaching from the south. 10 minutes out. Perfect timing, Wade replied, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. He turned back to the captured cartel forces, his gaze sweeping over their faces, imprinting his image on their memories. You have a choice now, Wade said, his voice echoing with chilling authority. Stay and face American justice, or run back to your bosses. Either way, spread the word. The next cartel that tries to take this valley won't get the gentle treatment you got tonight. El Fantasma, still clutching his wounded shoulder, looked up at Wade with a mixture of fear and respect. Who are you really? Wade smiled grimly, a flash of something ancient and dangerous in his eyes. Just a farmer protecting his land. But before that, I was the ghost that haunted better men than you. Remember that. The next time someone suggests moving into this territory, remember me. As police lights began to color the horizon, Wade's team prepared to fade away, melting back into the shadows from which they had emerged. They'd done what they came to do, not just defend a farm, but send a message that would echo through criminal organizations across the continent. They also knew that there would be even more eyes on them now. It was important to be 2 steps ahead. Dawn was breaking over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The scene before Wade was one of stark contrasts, the charred remains of the battle juxtaposed against the tranquil beauty of the awakening valley. 37 captured cartel members sat zip-tied in neat rows, watched over by the ever-vigilant Nash, while Cyrus and Knox secured the perimeter, ensuring no stray weapons or surprises remained. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but Wade knew the true work was just beginning. State Police ETA 3 minutes, Zane reported from his makeshift command post, his voice tight with suppressed energy. FBI about 20 minutes behind them. They're very interested in our guests. Wade surveyed his farm, calculating the damage with a practiced eye, mentally prioritizing repairs. The barn was scorched but standing, its reinforced structure having done its job. The farmhouse had taken heavy fire but remained structurally sound, a testament to the ingenuity of its design. His defensive positions, carefully built over years of preparation, had proven their worth. Sir, Nash called out, kneeling beside El Fantasma, who lay pale and weak on the ground, his face contorted with pain. He's stabilized, but he'll need a hospital eventually. The cartel boss looked up at Wade, his arrogance now replaced by something closer to grudging respect. You could have killed us all, he whispered, his voice raspy with pain. Wasn't the point, Wade replied, checking the zip ties on a nearby prisoner, his tone devoid of any emotion. Dead men don't carry messages. You're going to tell every cartel from here to Culiacan what happened tonight. Police sirens echoed through the valley, growing louder with each passing moment. Wade turned to his team, his gaze sweeping across their faces, imprinting their weary but determined expressions in his memory. Knox, Cyrus, fade back. No need to complicate things with extra questions. Nash, you're our medic, handling prisoners. Zane, wipe everything sensitive. I'll handle the locals. The team moved with practiced efficiency, melting back into the shadows, adopting their cover identities, preparing to disappear as quickly as they had appeared. Sheriff Cooper's convoy arrived first, a procession of 4 patrol cars and 2 tactical units. The sheriff, a man Wade had known for years, stepped out of his vehicle, his face a mixture of shock and awe as he surveyed the scene. Jesus Christ, Wade, Cooper breathed, his voice barely audible above the crackle of police radios. When we got reports of explosions and gunfire, what happened here? Had some uninvited guests, Wade replied calmly, his voice steady, betraying no hint of the chaos that had unfolded just hours before. They didn't take rejection well. Cooper walked the perimeter, shaking his head in disbelief, taking in the disabled vehicles, the captured cartel members, the precise damage to specific targets. This wasn't just a firefight, this was something else entirely. They came looking for an easy target, Wade explained, keeping his tone casual, almost apologetic. Found something else instead. Cooper's eyes narrowed, suspicion creeping into his gaze. Your FBI friends will be interested in this bunch. They're part of the group that's been terrorizing the valley, the ones we couldn't touch because we could never prove anything. Wade remained silent, letting Cooper draw his own conclusions. Looks like you proved plenty, Cooper said, a hint of admiration creeping into his voice. Nash approached, his medical kit in hand, maintaining his cover as a local paramedic. Sheriff, got some wounded here that need attention. Nothing critical, but they should see a hospital. Cooper keyed his radio, calling for ambulances. His deputies began processing the scene, their expressions a mix of professional duty and barely concealed amazement. Every cartel member was alive, injured in precise, non-lethal ways that spoke of extraordinary skill. Your guests have been busy, Cooper noted, examining confiscated ID cards and weapons. Mexican Special Forces gear, high-end communications equipment, military-grade weapons. This is bigger than we thought. Check the barn, Wade suggested, nodding towards the charred structure. Found some interesting paperwork. Might help with your other investigations. Zane had planted the intelligence carefully, documents linking the cartel to local crimes, property seizures, and accidents that had plagued the valley, enough evidence to unravel their entire operation. El Fantasma, lying on the ground, watched the law enforcement activity with cold, calculating eyes. This changes nothing, he whispered, his voice raspy with pain. The cartel will do exactly what we tell them to do, Wade cut him off, his voice laced with a chilling edge. Because if they don't, next time, we won't be so gentle. The implication hung in the air, heavy and menacing. FBI vehicles began arriving, black SUVs filled with serious-looking agents in tactical gear, evidence response teams, and senior investigators. Wade noted their approach patterns, their weapon handling, their demeanor. These weren't desk jockeys, they'd sent their A-team. Mr. Thorne, a female agent approached, her badge identifying her as Special Agent Sarah Martinez. We're going to need a statement about what happened here. Of course, Wade replied, his voice cooperative but guarded. It's pretty simple. They came to take my farm. I defended my property. Martinez's eyes swept the battlefield with military precision, taking in the multiple disabled vehicles, the wounded suspects showing consistent non-lethal injury patterns, and enough evidence to take down their entire regional operation. That's a night's work for one farmer. Grew up hunting, Wade shrugged, his expression carefully neutral. Got lucky. Lucky. Martinez raised an eyebrow, her gaze sharp and assessing. We've been building a case against these people for months, couldn't get near them. Then, in one night, you not only defeat their entire assault force, but hand us actionable intelligence on a silver platter. Sometimes, Wade said, his voice mild, things just work out. The agent clearly didn't buy it, but she was professional enough not to push. We'll need to process the scene, forensics, photographs, witness statements, you understand. Take all the time you need, Wade replied, nodding towards the northern part of his property, a subtle warning. Just watch the north field. Got some unstable ground there after all the excitement. Martinez, catching the warning, nodded slowly, understanding the unspoken agreement. Some evidence wouldn't be making it into official reports, some questions were better left unasked. The cleanup was about to begin. As law enforcement meticulously processed the scene, cataloging evidence and hauling away prisoners, Wade's hidden team faded further into the background, ensuring no trace of their presence remained. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets across the bloodied landscape. "Quite a mess you've made," Sheriff Cooper said, rejoining Wade on the porch, his expression a mix of admiration and concern. "But I've got to ask you, sure this is the end of it?" Wade watched as El Fantasma was loaded into an ambulance, surrounded by FBI agents, his face a mask of pain and defeat. "They're businessmen, Sheriff," Wade replied, his voice calm and steady. "Tonight showed them that pushing into this valley is bad business. Very bad business. And if they're slow learners, then they'll find out why some old soldiers never really retire." Nash approached, his medical kit in hand, maintaining his cover as a local paramedic. "Property's clear, Mr. Thorne. No unexpected surprises for the evidence teams." Wade nodded, watching the sun climb higher over his damaged but undefeated farm. The cartel had brought their best, former special forces, professional killers, military-grade hardware. They'd had every advantage in numbers and firepower. But they'd learned the hard way that some battles aren't won by strength alone. "You know," Cooper mused, watching his deputies photograph disabled vehicles, "folks in town always wondered about you. Quiet farmer, kept to himself, but something about you always seemed different." "Just a man protecting his home," Wade replied, his voice carefully neutral. But they both knew it was more than that. This night had sent a message that would echo through criminal organizations across the continent: some lines you don't cross, some people you don't threaten. Wade received a message from Martinez: "The big boys want to see you, I will be in touch." Sarah Bennett's truck appeared on the road, approaching cautiously. Wade nodded to his team, signaling them to maintain appearances. They faded back into their positions as Sarah pulled up, her face etched with concern. "Wade," she called out, jumping from her truck, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "The whole town's talking about what happened. They're saying you fought off the entire cartel by yourself." Wade smiled slightly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Stories get exaggerated. Just defended my property, that's all." "Don't give me that," Sarah retorted, her voice laced with affection. "I heard the explosions, I saw the gunfire. My brother's on the state police tactical team. He said this was military-grade resistance, professional work." "Sometimes farmers know more than people expect," Wade replied carefully, his gaze unwavering. "Coffee's fresh, if you want some inside." As they walked towards the farmhouse, Sarah took in the bullet holes in the walls, the precise pattern of damage, the overall scene of controlled chaos. "The cartel's pulling out, you know. Not just here. They're abandoning properties all across the valley. Running scared." "Good business decision on their part," Wade replied, his tone carefully non-committal. "This wasn't just about your farm, was it?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "This was about the whole valley." Wade considered his response, weighing his options. Sarah had proven herself trustworthy, and in a small community, some truths couldn't stay hidden forever. Let's just say some people needed to learn that not all territories are worth taking, Wade replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Knox's voice crackled in Wade's concealed earpiece. Vehicle approaching. Black SUV, government plates. Looks like our friends from Langley want a word. Wade squeezed Sarah's hand gently. Might want to head home. Got some more official visitors coming. Fewer witnesses make for easier conversations. After Sarah left, a CIA operative named Phillips arrived, his suit impeccably tailored, his demeanor smooth and professional. He was very interested in last night's events. Quite an operation, Phillips observed, declining Wade's offer of coffee. Reminds me of something I read about once, classified file from Kandahar. A team of operators who specialized in making problems disappear without leaving evidence. Sounds like an interesting read, Wade replied neutrally, his expression giving nothing away. Thing is, Phillips continued, his gaze locking with Wade's, that team officially doesn't exist. Just like what happened here last night officially won't exist. At least not the way local law enforcement thinks it did. Appreciate the professional courtesy, Wade replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. Phillips nodded. Just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. Oh, and pass along a message. Your old friend Colonel Hayes says the perimeter you set up reminds him of Serbia. Wade's expression didn't change, but inwardly he smiled. Some old debts were being paid, some old favors called in. The valley would be safer for it. After Phillips left, Wade's team regrouped in the barn, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The time had come for decisions about the future. Place will need rebuilding, Cyrus noted, examining the blast damage. Could use some help with that. Got some ideas for improvements. Cartels running, Zane added, his fingers flying across his laptop keyboard, monitoring the digital landscape. But they might not run forever. Might be worth maintaining a presence here. Knox cleaned his rifle methodically, his movements precise and efficient. Been thinking about retiring anyway. Montana's got good shooting ranges. Could use a clinic in the area, Nash mused, his gaze thoughtful. Local doctors getting old. Wade looked at his team, his friends, his brothers. Men who'd fought beside him across the world, who'd come running at his call without hesitation. You don't have to do this. Way I see it, Knox replied, his voice gruff but sincere, we spent our lives fighting in other people's countries. Maybe it's time we defended something closer to home. The decision was made without further discussion. The valley had gained more than just its freedom from the cartel, it had gained guardians, protectors, with very particular skills. Wade couldn't imagine a better way to use that set of skills than to protect home. What about El Fantasma? Cyrus asked, breaking the contemplative silence. He'll talk eventually, Wade shrugged, his expression indifferent. Let him. By the time he does, everything he knows will be outdated. Besides, who'd believe him? A cartel boss claiming he was defeated by a team of retired Delta operators. He paused, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Speaking of which, Zane checked his phone, a smirk spreading across his face. Got word from our friends in federal custody. Our message is spreading. 3 other cartels have already pulled back operations from neighboring counties. Seems nobody wants to risk running into the ghosts of Montana. Wade walked his property one last time as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the valley. The damage would be repaired, the signs of battle would fade, but something fundamental had changed. The valley had been marked, not as an easy target, but as a place where shadows fought back, where threats were met with precision and skill instead of brute force. Quite a change from retirement, Nash observed, joining him on the crest of a small hill overlooking the valley. Going to miss the quiet life? Wade asked, a hint of amusement in his voice.